Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today I want to talk about watering your earth beds or your garden that is not containers. I'll do a series on watering container plants. That's very, very different. So today it's 82 degrees, unseasonably warm. It is the 13th of April, still our cool season here in Maryland. My plants that we're going to go through, these were all watered 2 days ago, really well. So 2 days later, we've been getting this crazy hot temperature. First thing you want to do is recognize that these plants have been in here for 3 weeks. So these are established transplants. The root system has gone down into the earth. So they're not going to need as much water. But you come over here and you move away the topsoil, you can see that it's still light. Not even quite an inch. We're getting to moisture. So there's plenty of water in here, even some earthworms moving around. So the bed here actually probably doesn't have to be watered, but I'm going to water it because one of the things that you want to do is water on a routine. That's the best way to ensure your plants get the water that they need. And if I had to say one thing for what makes a garden not fail, but allows your plants not to thrive to capacity, that's underwatering. The more that you water, the better off your plants are going to be. And we'll be covering that as we walk around. Same thing, these plants have been established, lettuce plants. Move the soil away, moist. I could skip watering here. However, a week ago, I put these in as transplants. They don't have an established root system like these plants that have been in for several weeks, where the roots are going down deeper into the water. In fact, you know, now that it's been a week, peas grow pretty quickly, so I'm sure they sent some roots down. But when you're putting in new transplants, they're going to have to be watered several times, I think, a week when your temperatures are getting into the 70s and 80s, even if it's still your cool weather. Let me show you an example. So I'm going to water this bed in just because I want to hit the peas, and if I'm already over here watering, I might as well add more water in. The plants here were watered in yesterday because I just planted them, but you can see that there's some wilting right there. Again, we were with cool weather crops. I'm going to just pull this one right out of the ground because this is what the root system looks like, and this is what I want to stress. When you're putting in your transplants, let me put this back in there, until they've been in here for a good 7 days minimum, you know, probably 14 days, the root systems are just where you saw them. They're just around the base of the plant. So we put in a transplant, we water it, then it gets really hot like this. It's not able to pull in any of the water that's over here. So that's why these transplants need to be watered at least 2 times a week until they're established, because the root system is small and it's only pulling water in from right around there. So even though today looks pretty good, another day of 80-degree temps, this guy's going to be hungry for water or thirsty for water. So I'm going to water them in. And the reason I can't tell you how often to water, how much to water, it's going to vary greatly based on the consistency of your soil, how much organic matter's in there, how big the plants are, what you're growing. Let's spin right over here. This is a bed that's not mulched. And again, these beds were watered, you know, 2 or 3 days ago. You can see that the soil is cracking. The top is drying first. These are seedlings. They're somewhat established. But if you're growing, if you're starting plants by seed, if the temperatures are getting into the 70s and 80s and it's full sun, you're going to have to water these beds in at least every other day because the root systems again aren't established. The water is being wicked off the top of the surface from evaporation, wind, the sun, and it's starting to crack. As those cracks form, they may go by roots, they may dry out the roots. So seedlings, you're watering at least 3 times a week. If it were 40-degree, 50-degree temperatures, cool weather crops going back and forth, I don't have to water them as often. Let me rephrase that. Temperatures going back and forth for the cool season crops, I don't have to water them that often. But when that temperature comes and the soil is drying, you really want to make sure you take care of your germinating seeds, and that's about 3 times a week to start. Let's look where there's some mulch. This is where I think it's important for me to actually cut in and say, if you're looking for exact directions on how often to water, when to water, how much water certain plants need, when do you water seed starts, seedlings, directly sowed seeds, etc., you're just never going to find that. So I'll save you the time. I'm just going to show you principles, and you're going to kind of have to build around the principles for your garden. And you have to kind of just learn about what your garden needs, because every garden zone is different. Temperatures are different. What I'm doing now in April is going to be very different than how I have to water in June and July when the summer heat really rolls in. It's going to vary based on the plants. I have mostly cool weather crops in right now. When I'm going to the warm weather crops of tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, they're going to need deeper watering. I'm going to have certain plants that have shallow roots. It's really important to keep the top 4 inches moist and use mulch, because plants use water to pull in nutrients. So even though there's water deep in the ground and the plants are staying alive, if I'm not keeping that top 4-6 inches saturated, plants are going to have a harder time moving nutrients into their system. So it's going to vary, and I hope you take this video more based on principles. And if you're looking for something that tells you exactly, you don't know how to water, or someone to tell you exactly how to water, unfortunately I'm not able to do that. The plants in here went in not quite 7 days ago, but I have layers of mulch, and as I pull the mulch away, it's still damp, the cardboard is still damp. I know that moisture's in there, so these really don't need to be watered. So if you're able to put mulch down, that's going to cut back drastically on how often you have to water. The roots in here aren't well established, just like the celery plant that I showed you, but because the moisture is staying beneath the mulch is keeping the moisture in, this guy can probably go a little bit longer. I also have shade cloth over it. So mulch helps control moisture. Shade cloth helps keep the plants cooler. So I'm going to skip watering this group of plants because it's got the shade cloth, the mulch, and it's good to go. It's hard to use mulch for seedlings because you don't want to plant seeds into this. So mulch is great for your transplants. Seedlings, you have to keep that watering going. If you're just putting the seeds in and you're having these crazy hot temperatures, again, you know, every other day, you might have to water them in every day, just in that beginning week too, because you don't want that top to dry out where the seed is. And this hot weather, a good 8 hours, 10 hours of 80-degree sun can really dry out a plant. Here's a good example of broccoli plants that are wilting, and they were planted just like the celery that I just showed you. They all went in the same day. Even with mulch, these are drying out. The sun is probably pulling the moisture out of that little root ball zone, so these definitely have to get watered. And I hope you understand that what we're kind of talking about is principles, and it's really based on how your plants are growing, the size they're growing. In here I have carrots. They're well established. They've been in here for weeks. If I move the soil away, 1, it's really warm. 2, I have to go down almost an inch to get to moisture. The good news is that when a seed germinates, the first thing it does is sends the root down so that it can get to water, it can get to resources, and then the root, generally speaking, starts spreading out in other places. So these guys are well established. That being said, I have radishes coming up, and the soil's still got moisture in it because I watered it 2 days ago. If I didn't water 2 days ago in this heat, this would be dried out and it would start to crack. I still want to hit this guy with a little bit of water, soak in that top 2 inches. That will be great for these plants to survive. So you have shallow watering, which I just kind of mentioned, as I'm just going to water this real quick so the water goes in that top inch, top 2 inches. There's plenty of moisture below. These are all pretty much shallow rooted plants. It's going to be a quick watering. I'll show you how to do that. If we were watering deeper rooted vegetables, maybe like tomatoes, we're into the summer, the plants are bigger, you're going to want to really soak that area in and get a deep watering where that water is going down a good foot or so. I have videos on that, but I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. And then finally, coming over here, this lettuce is probably 7 days established, starting to wilt. What I need to add here is mulch. That will help keep the soil cooler, keep the water in. Lettuces and a lot of your leafy greens are like 70, 80, 90% water. Same thing with the kale over there. So that was kind of a long way to explain. If you got hot sun, it's beating down on your plants, you have to water them. But don't feel like in these earth beds that you can overwater plants. You really can't do that. In containers, maybe. But in earth beds, when in doubt, water extra. And let me just show you the difference between watering a shallow watering and a deep watering. We'll be talking about containers and vertical gardening in a different video. Over here you can see I have a lot of containers. They have to be watered differently, and some things to keep in mind. A fabric pot may dry out more quickly than a plastic pot. A terracotta pot that pulls water out will dry out quickly like a fabric pot. So there's a lot going on that you have to pay attention to. Some plants that have established root systems would be the garlic. They've been growing since the fall. They have nice deep root systems, and we'll go over there and take a quick look. And when we come over there, let me just get around my shadow. There's still moisture in there because I did just water them, but as we're going down, more moisture, a lot cooler. I don't really have to worry about this because they have deeper established roots, and I am doing a quick check, noticing that about 1 inch down, the soil throughout the entire earth beds has moisture in it. So in the plants that I showed you, the first priority are brand new transplants, and you're giving them at least that much water right on top, and that's enough to really sink down 2 to 4 inches, give the plants the water that it needs. This is not really a deep soaking, although we're doing a lot of water on here. I will give you an example of deep soaking in a pepper pot where I plant my peppers that doesn't have a pepper plant yet, but you'll get the idea. So on here, the top ½ inch or so starts to crack. These are fairly new, newly germinated radish plants. I'm waiting for some parsnips to come up right in here. I want to water this enough to the soil swells, the organic matter absorbs the water, and the crack that was over there begins to go away. The radish is over there. You're watering it, you know, you're kind of visualizing that this water is dropping in about 1 inch depth to where it's going to meet the already moist soil in there. Something like that's not enough. So you want to kind of keep going until you see the water pooling. And you would, well, maybe you would believe it, but the number one question I get probably overall is how much and when do I water my plants? And it's really difficult to tell people how often to do it. What you notice here is the crack in the soil has closed. That's a good enough watering. If this 80-degree temperature continues, nice and sunny, probably won't water this space again tomorrow, but I'll keep an eye on it. If it goes for 2 days, I'm going to have to come back and do the same thing. Let me show you another space. Here's the other priority before we go over to that other space. These guys are wilting, so I want to cool off the whole area, and I'm giving it a really good drink just to get around the root ball that I transplanted, and just make sure there's extra water just around there. Most likely the outer leaves that are wilting a little bit are probably going to die off. It's pretty normal for new transplants because the root systems are in just that small, you know, ball. With the heat, water issues, the lower leaves, the outer leaves may die out. That's just the plant preserving itself, putting all the nutrients to the new growth in the center. Don't worry about that. But keeping them totally soaked every other day with 80-degree temps makes a difference. The seeds in here were put in about 10 days ago. You want to make sure that top inch of the soil is staying moist while you're, you know, waiting for your seeds to germinate and establish. You can't overwater germinating seeds. All this water, especially in earth beds, obviously, is just going to go down into the ground. The seeds, again, when they germinate, they do send a root that goes straight down, but you want to keep the soil nice and moist. Over here, you can see maybe some of, let's see what that is. That is a cabbage. That's starting to germinate. With the 80-degree temperatures, you know, they can get beat up. Right now, that's not enough water. All we did was really soak the top. That will really dry out in about a half an hour. So you're really soaking in, just imagining the water soaking that top inch, 2 inches of the soil. And we know that when we check the soil, we moved back about 1 inch and we knew that moisture was down there. The other reason that you want to keep that top 2 inches moist is because plants use water to move nutrients into their systems. So even though they might be getting, you know, enough of what they need to survive deeper in the ground, that's pretty good for this space. These are crimson giant radishes. They were planted on 3/23. That's about 20 days ago. In the back I have peas. And again, if we go and move across the surface, 1/2 inch, we already see moistures in there. That's because I've been watering about every 2 days. The moisture is really, really key if you want your plants to thrive. We're not just talking about them surviving. They'll survive perfectly fine with less water, but you want them to thrive and produce. And again, we're thinking in this case, because we know there's water 1/2 inch down, something like that, just to kind of rehydrate the top couple of inches. And that's plenty of water on this really hot day in April for this area. And then I'll have to go back there and take care of the peas. In case you want to see it, and because I said I'll do a lot of examples, these are the carrots. And remember, there's moisture down there. Carrots have that long tap root. That's not enough water. It's getting absorbed really quickly. You just want to know that you're really soaking that top 2 inches. And it makes all the difference when you're watering your garden much more often than you think. And again, it's really hard to overwater earth beds or raised beds. That's what I consider a good soaking for the carrot plants. The radishes that are producing now, I mean, radish doesn't really send out a lot of surface roots. That root goes down. But same thing. Something like this, because it doesn't have a lot of surface roots, I'm actually probably watering this a little bit less than I just did the carrots. I just want to make sure that top inch has water in it. By putting the water back on that top inch, what's the easiest way to say it? Usually the ground dries from the top down. The sun, wind evaporates the water, it dries, and then the water below kind of moves to where it's dry. By putting that water layer back on that top inch, I'm preserving the water that's down below where the radish deeper root is using it. So I just give it a quick water so that everything stays where it's at. One plant that really gets overlooked are onion transplants or even leek transplants. These went into the ground about 13 days ago. I've been watering them, but you can see outer leaves are yellowing and dying off, perfectly normal. They're going from a cushy life growing in my greenhouse or indoors. They're not really worried about the sun evaporation, but you really want to soak the onions in, you know, every couple of days. Now, keep in mind we have not had any rain here in the last probably 10 days, and we've been getting full sun, warm days. This is going to vary, you know, based on kind of what's going on with your temperatures. But the more water you give onions, the better they do, especially when they're hilled up like this. You can't overwater them. The water is going to go right into the depth of the soil, but it's going to surround the root system and they're going to be happy. I think we'll finish up with me showing you a little bit about what deep watering is. That's a little bit different than what we've been doing. I will link the video that shows you how to do that, where I measure the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket and I show you how to figure out how long does it take for your hose to put out 2 inches of water around the base. And this is about the size of a 5-gallon bucket, or generally speaking how you would want to water a pepper plant, eggplant, your squash, cucumber, plants that are established where you want to give them a nice deep watering. A deep watering will certainly, you know, water the top 2, 4, 6 inches, that's fine, but you want to get down to the deeper roots. So I know, use the video that I'm linking below, that 10 seconds, and we would count, you know, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. That's going to give me 2 inches of water around the base, which is plenty of water for this to seep down deeply. That's a deep soaking. We probably would still go for a little bit longer. Now, again, I want to stress, and I guess we'll wrap up kind of where we started. No video, no person can tell you how often to water, what plants need to be watered in a certain way each week. It's all going to vary. Your plants can survive with a 2-inch deep watering once a week. You're going to see that. But they're going to thrive if you're doing it 2 or 3 times. It's all going to vary based on the heat, the size of the plants, all that kind of stuff. But the more you water regularly, the more your plants are going to thrive, the more harvest you're going to get, the better things are going to be. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com. And when you're watering your earth beds, raised beds, anything out kind of in a garden like this, you really can't overwater.